Hey, 7th grade. Mr. Hildebrand here. This lesson is going to be about ancient Greek philosophy. You want to pay attention to this one, especially because today we're going to fill out a chart that you're going to actually be able to use on the test to help you answer some of the questions. Now, when we think of philosophy, we think of logic and reasoning. We think of people who have big questions about the world. They're always asking why. Their brains never stop moving. And that's the ancient Greeks. We know that they were very competitive with sports, war, art, everything. And that included school and learning as well. So they're going to have some pretty smart people that are really going to influence the way we even think today. So first thing I want to show you is if you go to the Canvas page and you go to World History and you go down to Course Modules, this is week 9. So the lesson notes and links, if you want the Nearpod with the info, it's on this page, but I also did post it on the assignments page, so it's on both pages. And that's going to be really important because we need those notes for today. If you scroll down to 1021, that's the lesson for today, okay, on Wednesday. We'll see the link to the notes right here. You click that, it's going to open up the Nearpod. You just put your name, click Join Lesson, and it'll pop up for you. But the second thing you're going to need open, or at least maybe go back to later, is the class kick. There is a chart on class kick that you can actually fill out, and then you're going to be able to use it on the test. Okay, so if you're in school, or I was able to get you, I think I got it to most people, a paper copy, you can use the paper copy, or you can use the digital one on class kick. Now, if you don't really want to use class kick because you're like, Mr. Hildebrand, I don't want to be opening up class kick while I'm doing my test, and it's a lot of tabs. You can write this down on paper too. You can make your own chart as we go along. But I kind of want to show it to you on class kick so you have that visual. All right. So click on the class kick, open it up. It's going to look something like this. Okay, you just put your name, Mr. H, continue, and it's going to pop up. And we're going to see it's called Ancient Greek Philosophers. Now, it's not worth any points because remember, you're just using this to help you on your test. But as you can see, we're going to put philosophers' names. Those are our thinkers that we're going to talk about today, our famous people. Why they're important, right in here, we'll type it in. Who they taught, famous people they taught, why they are important. Who they're going to teach, why they're important, and eventually we're going to talk about somebody who is a famous student, okay, that you've actually heard of before. So I want to go back and show you that again. If you go down to 1021, go open up the Nearpod right here, open up the class kick, you'll have both. Or if you don't want to do the class kick, grab a piece of paper. Okay. All right, so let's start with the Nearpod. Let's talk about philosophy for a second. Philosophy is all about ideas, Now, in class today on the Zoom, we did watch a little bit about Socrates and who he was and some of the other Greek philosophers. So you can watch that video on the Nearpod. We watched the second one specifically just about Socrates because he's going to be probably the most famous of our philosophers, and he's going to kick off our discussion today. But the Greeks, they placed a great importance on intelligence and intellect, being able to learn and to reason and to argue, right? We all love to argue. The Greeks were excellent at it. Philosophia is the Greek term for philosophy, and that's basically a love of wisdom. They loved getting smart, right? And that's going to kind of translate into why they're such great scientists, which we'll talk about tomorrow, and mathematicians, and then also philosophers. So Socrates, he was from Athens. He is one of our first philosophers that we'll talk about. He was really interested in how people thought. He used to run a business, and he actually gave that up to become a full-time philosopher, to search for truth and to teach people. He thought that if people could discover truth, if they knew how to think, right? If they went through the mental processes the right way. And Socrates, he tried to teach people by asking them questions. So you might have sat through a Socratic seminar or heard of a teacher say Socratic method before. That's when they're going to ask you a ton of questions to get you to think about maybe the most basic but most important ideas, right? Each question's kind of step-by-step designed to make a person think and eventually lead them to something that's true, right? That's the Socratic method. Not all Athenians liked him. Some did. He had a lot of students, and a lot of people did like what he said, but there was also a lot of people who didn't like him because he asked uncomfortable questions. He made them kind of think about their own beliefs. He challenged them sometimes. Some people thought he was dangerous. Some people just didn't like thinking that hard. They didn't like thinking about themselves, examining their own mistakes, trying to learn. They'd rather just be ignorant and keep making mistakes. So people started to accuse him of all kinds of things. And some of the things he was accused of, and wrongfully so, was denying the gods, denying their religion, just because he would ask questions about religion. They also accused him of corrupting the young or the youth because he taught a lot of students. And then also trying to overthrow the government because he would ask questions about democracy, monarchy, tyranny, oligarchy, all those ancient Greek governments. He would ask questions about them and try to figure out what's best. And people didn't like that. They felt like it was being challenged. Now, Socrates was put on trial before a jury of 500 citizens. He defended himself. He spoke about truth and trying to find truth. And in doing that, trying to find goodness, right? Be a good citizen. Socrates refused to change his beliefs, even when they threatened him. They said, Socrates, if you just say you were wrong, if you take back everything you said, we'll let you live. If you don't, we're going to convict you on denying the gods, on corrupting the youth, and for trying to overthrow the government. And Socrates said, no, I'm not wrong. I'm not going to take it back. And so the jury found him guilty, and they sentenced him to death. And his punishment was to die by drinking poisonous hemlock juice, which actually slowly paralyzes you. It's a very painful and slow death. Later, the citizens of Athens, they are going to regret that. And they end up putting a bronze statue in his honor, to honor him. And I think the people of Athens just really regretted it. They acted hastily. They didn't give him a chance, and they reacted poorly. Now, I want to stop there for a second because we already have our first philosopher. So I'm going to head over to class kick, this one right here. And our first philosopher that you're going to fill in on your chart, or you're going to make your own chart on paper, is Socrates. And we learned a couple things about why he's important. Okay, he develops the Socratic method, right? Asking questions to get to truth. Okay, he was focused on the learning process, and he was eventually brought up on charges of denying the gods, challenging the government, and corrupting the youth. And he was found guilty. And then eventually he was executed. But then later, they built a statue for him. Okay, so he's going to kind of kick off a lot of this philosophy, get people thinking. And he's going to have a famous student. His famous student on the Nearpod is Plato. So we can go ahead on our chart and put in Plato. Now Plato, he watched all this stuff happen to Socrates. And Socrates didn't write anything down. He just gave speeches. And so everything we know about him came from people who wrote his speeches down. And Plato is one of those students who did that. Plato was an Athenian aristocrat, so he did come from money. He was rich. He recorded Socrates' speech, and he saw and witnessed Socrates' death. Now, Plato started out as a politician, a government leader, and he changed his mind. He said, I don't want to be in part of the government here in Athens after he saw what they did to his friend Socrates. And so he actually travels to Egypt and then to Italy, and he goes around and he's learning from different people all around the Mediterranean. And then eventually he returns to Greece to start a school right outside of Athens. If we translate it to English, we call it the Academy. Right? And his goal was to train government leaders. He wanted quality government leaders based on logic and reasoning, not ruled by emotions, not easily swayed, but who would make sound, solid decisions, especially because he saw what bad leaders would do to people like Socrates. Okay, his school is going to last for over 900 years. He kind of had some contrary ideas about how Athens could be great. He thought that political liberty and democracy could lead to disorder and chaos, like what would happen with Socrates. And so he thought only the wise and the good should rule. You'd have to read his text to figure out his definition of wise and good, but he thought it should just be a few people. He wrote books about the government called The Republic. He wrote a lot about political science and government, and kind of explained how the different systems could be better, right, to avoid some political errors. He also wrote a lot about philosophy in a book called The Dialogues. We watched a little video about one of his famous thought experiments, okay, called The Cave. And so let's go ahead and fill in our Plato. Okay, Plato. So he was Socrates' student. Wrote down Socrates' speeches. Started a school for politicians. Wrote The Republic, was his famous book. Capitalize that. Which is a book about government. And then he wrote the book The Dialogues, okay, about philosophy, right? Trying to find truth. And he's going to have a famous student as well called Aristotle. Now, Aristotle, he's the scientist of the group. Okay, he's going to write over 200 books of his own. He founds his own school as well, just like his mentor Plato did. And he was fascinated with the natural world, plants, animals, people, and he wanted to classify them. He also adds to the scientific method. He's going to add the hypothesis step. So you've been learning about that in science class. He's the guy who added the hypothesis to it all. And he also made lots of other contributions to philosophy, logic, and reasoning. Specifically something called syllogism, which you'll definitely learn about in college when you take a philosophy course. Okay, it's kind of like if A is true and B is true, then C. And you'll learn more about that later. Here is kind of an interesting way that he categorized animals. He started those with red blood and those without red blood, and kind of went from there. Obviously, we've made a lot of scientific advances beyond that. And that's kind of how he started. He was one of the first to do it. This is a really corny video I posted about this scientific method. I'm going to send it to Miss Bryant so she can torture her students next year with it. But if we're going to add some stuff to our class kick here about Aristotle, say that he started a school. He wrote over 200 books. He also added hypothesis to the scientific method. We could also say, just mention syllogism. Oh, I definitely did not spell that right. I think I need another L in there. Syllogism, parenthesis would be added to philosophy. And then he's actually going to be the teacher of somebody famous. Now, this person is not a philosopher, but this person is somebody famous that you know. He's a famous leader, and he taught Alexander the Great. It's that guy who came in and conquered Persia, and conquered Greece and Egypt, and made it the whole way to India. That guy. He's going to be Aristotle's student. All right, folks, feel free to copy this down on your own paper, your own version of the chart. You can this will automatically save, so if you need to go back in and check it later, you can always go back in, put your same name, and it'll bring it up. And then you can feel free to use this to jog your memory. It's a little bit of help on the test if you need it. All right, folks, if you have questions, send me an email, and I'll see you tomorrow.